Our next speaker perhaps has one of the toughest jobs in the marketing industry. His name is Colin Cook, and he's marketing director of the British Army. So his job is to recruit soldiers and officers to the regular and to the territorial army. I think a lot of you will be familiar with the Start Thinking Soldier campaign, which has got to be one of the landmark campaigns in interactive in the UK ever, I would say. I mean, it's one of my favourite. And I remember when it launched, and I remember going through it and being like, wow, this is incredible. I didn't quite join the army, but almost. But it's interesting speaking to Colin earlier about how things have evolved, and what Colin's going to talk about today a little bit is how that kind of era of the big campaign and the big wow factors is kind of passed a little bit, and what Colin's going to talk about is how businesses are being re-engineered socially, how social media is really influencing business structure, and so that is really feeding into the marketing strategy rather than saying, right, I've got £20 million, let's go TV, digital, bam. So I'd like to introduce Colin, who's going to talk a little bit about that.
I'm going to get terribly competitive about this. Ahmed is not the person to talk to if you want a job. I am. May not be quite what you were hoping for. I'd also point out that I'm wearing a tie rather than a scarf, not because I've got a bad throat, but because I spent the morning at the Ministry of Defence, and therefore I'm dressed for that rather than today, I'm afraid. I'm going to be very quick because I was asked to do 5 minutes on emerging trends, and I'll try and talk about this from the perspective of one of those people that you talked about earlier, one of those horrible marketing directors where everything has to be simplified for us in nice diagrams. I've actually seen the diagram that was shown before, so it obviously has currency and has made its way around the industry. And I've got a slide right at the end, which is a highly simplistic slide that I shared with a group of marketing directors about a couple of months ago, and I put it in because it does sort of show the way in which sometimes you have to talk about these things to get messages across. Businesses, as was said, how businesses are starting to react to social media, that we've moved beyond the stage of the great explosion of social media onto the commercial scene to a point where we're now realizing it's fundamentally changing business structures. And I haven't got the slide that's going to show you how this is happening in the recruiting industry, but I think the recruiting industry is actually at the forefront of a lot of this, because if social is anything, it's about building long-term relationships, and that's what recruiting has always traditionally been about. The second thing I want to talk about is how I think there's a return to the purity of social. I mean, it's terrible to talk about something that is not very old, returning to its essence, but I think marketers are realizing that social media is, funnily enough, social. And the way in which many of us have tried to use it as a transactional media to support our own commercial ends is, I think, becoming extremely and rapidly outdated. And then finally, I did want to share the slide, but I won't be, about the advice that we give to marketing directors coming in to those roles now, about the kind of people that they need to recruit and the kind of structures and things they need to think about as they go forward. So let me start firstly about changing businesses. Recruiting was very simple and always has been very simple. You try and attract, you run an advert or you run a campaign and you try and attract as many people as possible to apply for your job, and then you process them in some way and you appoint the one person at the end of the process that you sort out to get. In my case, I need 20,000, but it's the same basic process as if you were recruiting one person to work as your intern. Now that has changed, and it's changed, or it is changing very rapidly because of social media. That huge expense that we all used to incur, and Start Thinking Soldier was a very good example of that, of trying to create contacts for you, people who are genuinely at that time interested in working for you, is hugely wasteful. What the recruiting industry is now doing, what we're now doing, is trying to attract people who are vaguely interested in you, or may be interested in you in the future, or are prepared to consider you in the future, and are prepared to enter into a relationship, but not necessarily one about the act of recruitment. So that you can talk to these people and hold these people prior to the recruiting process. And that's hugely different because that's cheaper and it's a lot more effective. And it means that when you do have a job, or 20,000 of them, you can go to that pool that you're discussing things with and talking about rather than the open market. And it means that you can do that without having to resort to huge advertising campaigns in the first instance. What that, of course, means is that you have to be, and it again was one of the trends that was described earlier, is you have to be talking about being always on. You've got to keep those channels open. That interest in the army might develop at any time. It may not just develop when we actually have a vacancy to fulfill. And what I want to do is try and encourage as many people as possible into that pool. These two slides show examples of how we used to do this. If anyone can remember Start Thinking Soldier, Start Thinking Soldier used a TV campaign to drive people to our website where there were some really interesting interactive games. But to keep that relationship going with people who had come in to play challenges and games was hugely expensive because the technology at our disposal, and we're only talking about 2 or 3 years ago, it was the first campaign I did, was hugely expensive. We had to take people to events, we had to meet them in the fields, we had to have interactive experiences where people could touch and feel and all this kind of thing, because they were already in our recruiting pipeline. To get onto that, you had to commit to a sort of recruiting pipeline. Now, we're able to do things in a different way, and this is our latest campaign. It actually, I think, breaks in this sense tomorrow. We're doing a very, very similar thing, but this time we're using Facebook as the platform. And this is our website, but I just want to show you what I meant about the fact that there are now 2 rules. If you go onto our website and you're interested in joining the Territorial Army, and please do, because I've got to recruit about 5,000 people, and most of you are very well within the age bracket that is required. I'm afraid this is what happens when you work in my business. You start to look out and think, The 2 separate pools are transparently there when you get to the website. Look at the challenge, and there's an interactive challenge, which I'll show you later, or many interactive challenges, because they're a lot cheaper to provide. On Facebook, apply for the TA. Join our pool that is about recruiting now. Join our pool, which is about potentially having some interest and maybe, in the future, considering us. And it'll be a different relationship, but that's what we want from you. And these are some of the challenges that you will, one of the challenges you will see. This is about taking something up a mountain. Well, it's a large hill, let's say. And it's about, what would I do in that situation? How would I demonstrate leadership qualities? The kind of thing that an army officer, or in this case, a member of the Territorial Army, would have to think about. And it's a completely different way of organizing it. This is sort of hinting at what I was saying also about the fact that I think we're now returning to the purity of social media. I think we all fell for this notion that what we had to do for our brands was to set up a Facebook site and occasionally put out nice messages about how tasty our chocolate bar was, or in my case, how good the career was, or a particular opportunity. And I think we're realizing now as an industry that for it to be effective, you just need to be able to maintain, stimulate, support a discussion. And these kind of things, where hopefully people will find them interesting and will pass them on to people, and they're not overtly about recruiting, is very much the future of our industry. It's about always being on, because that will work as something that's engaging for anybody out with the campaign. There doesn't have to be a campaign going on for that to have some relevance. Finally then, because I know I've only got 5 minutes, I wanted to talk about what I think that's doing to marketing departments. Now, I haven't got the slide that I shared with my colleagues the other day. But one part of it was its very simplicity, and it was about the kind of relationships that we need in marketing. I mean, the first thing is that some of the classic functions of a marketing director are still relevant today, or probably more relevant today. To get us through these, to keep up with these new trends, to react to them and to actually change the model in which your business works, means that you do need new suppliers, new agencies. And you have to be able to identify them, and you have to keep aware of what's out in the marketplace. But you've also got to find people who will fit in to the other types of organizations and suppliers that you have, and will culturally fit into your organization. And that is a big challenge for the marketing team. Second thing is you've got to reappraise your internal relationships as a marketing guy. For years, we've argued about what was more important, marketing or the press office in big corporates like myself. And this was a terrible thing. We always fought each other, and neither could recognize the value that each other brought. And actually, the whole thing has changed now, because we're in the same marketplace. And actually, some of the skills that were traditionally required by public relations press people around being able to maintain a conversation, finding an interesting story about your company, spinning it out to the rest of the world, letting people look at what you're doing, are now critical to marketing. So that whole debate has changed. And finally, and we always say this now to people in my profession, is you have to realize that the classic route to marketing success has changed. The fact that the thought that you could get to the top of the marketing industry now without being IT literate, or at least having the good sense to recognize that the guys in the IT department are your friends, not your enemies, or worse still, just the people that you sort of maybe poke fun at some point during the day, have gone. And what we're going to see, and what we are seeing, and I think it's a key trend in some of Britain's leading companies, is the development of joint marketing and IT departments where those skills are brought together. And I think they're the companies that you'll be able to see will be at the forefront of some of the things that these guys are going to be talking about in the future. Apologize for the slides not turning up. That is clearly a sign of the old world that I maybe inhabit with my tie in the Ministry of Defence. I hope you get a sense that, however, though, that recruitment as an industry, the Army, I hope in particular, is changing and changing very fast. So thank you.
Thanks, Colin. That's real fascinating insight into what's happening at the Army. Final speaker today, Ottokar Rosenberger, is UK Country Manager at eHarmony. Delighted to welcome Ottokar here today. And I guess a lot of you will have heard the stat that eHarmony in the States is apparently accountable for 5% of new marriages, which, I mean, to me is quite an incredible stat. So no pressure on Ottokar to repeat that feat over here, I guess. Ottokar, is that right? It's a really interesting business Ottokar works for, and it's an interesting time in the UK. There are a lot of incumbents, and it's quite an interesting place to be as a challenger brand. Ottokar is very much on top of new technology, and the emerging trend he's chosen to talk about today is social TV and the rise of multi-screen marketing, which is something, you know, with smartphones, tablets, is obviously really taking off. So I'd like to welcome Ottokar on stage.
Right, I shall try and see if I press the right button. Great, good. So if you are looking for a job, please find Omid or Colin. If you're trying to find the love of your life, you can come to me. Right. What I'd like to, and I think I have less than 5 minutes, so I'll try and keep this short. But what I would like to talk you through is what I think is an emerging trend that will kick off in 2012 or in the next coming years in a big way. And Neil here at the beginning mentioned some really important trends, as in the customer journeys are changing. We have real time, it's always on. And I think social TV, as such, actually provides a real game changer in that aspect. So I'm going to throw that out there, and hopefully there'll be a healthy debate about it. What I mean is really the change of how we actually experience and view TV programs. And I thought about 3 stats to throw out there. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with those. Looking at them together, though, might be a good sort of clue to that. First of all, and I heard it many times before, and I used to, I worked for 10 years for Procter & Gamble before before joining the startup world. So I'm a bit of an old school, new school guy, I guess. The TV isn't dead, and it's not going to die. We watch 4 hours. Every viewer watches 4 hours every day. In the UK, that's a 2010 stat. That's up over the years before that. So that's great. And in a single Facebook session, we spend 25 minutes, which is also great, but it doesn't compare to 4 hours. I think it's going to stay. I think we like to be entertained that way. What is changing is what we do whilst we watch TV. So 75% of users who watch a TV program actually use some other technology. And again, we know that. It'll be a mobile phone, it'll be a laptop, Wi-Fi made all of that possible. However, that also increased dramatically. So years ago, I recall seeing that at 40, 50% and so on. So this is really a rise of using various pieces of technology of kid in your home. Now, some thought on this, and you know, don't want to take you through the history of TV. I think that's not my place. But clearly, there have been some trials with like two-way communications, like buttons and so on. We do see connected TV, but I think social TV actually does something that we've seen in the past as well. I don't know how many of you, if you know this, but if you even think back to the 18th century, this might be a long shot. Let's try it out. Let's try it out. But if you'd watch an opera in Vienna, and by the way, I'm Austrian, I'm from Vienna, so maybe that's why this example is here. So you watch an opera by Mozart, people wouldn't sit still. That was not a done thing. That's an invention of the 21st century. In the 18th century, people would walk around. So basically, there would be conversation, there would be drinks shared, it would be a very loud environment, and there would be a stage, and the opera would be performed. Think about, maybe closer to home, the London Globe Theatre, right? So in the London Globe Theatre, it's actually quite loud, and people are commenting on the play, and that is how we like to interact with entertainment. So I think the notion of just sitting still and watching it, a bit like a couch potato, I guess, isn't really what we are about. I think social TV, and by that I mean watching a TV program and having that enhanced with an application. Probably the most known one will be CBox at this point in time, where you can invite your friends to watch that TV program with you together. You have trending tags according to the topic, and these tags change by the second. So if you would watch, I tried this out on Newsnight, for example, as the topics come up, you will have trending tags of the people that appear in the program. You have your Twitter feed, and you can comment with your friends. So I think that's going to change the way that we as brands have to interact with this medium. Up to this point, mainly I could choose a 30-second spot, try and tell you a story in 30 seconds, brand it properly, make sure that I tell you something that makes you act upon it, and that was about it. And then I had different channels at different times. But when Neil talks about real time, I think social TV brings that whole journey, the probably 0, 1st, and 2nd moment of truth into maybe this one moment that you have here. Let me try some examples. So you might watch a cooking show with Nigella Lawson. She might cook up something. Your friends are watching that as well because they're probably quite interested in that. Given you like to be with people who are like you, I don't know, I know we don't want to accept that, but I can tell you from a relationship perspective, people that are similar to you and compatible with you are actually great. Because you don't want to argue 24 hours per day, right? So you'll see that show. It's, I don't know, Wednesday evening. You have a dinner party on Friday night with some of those friends. She cooks up a marvelous chocolate cake, and you think, oh, lovely. You might have a quick conversation with your friends and say, are you seeing that marvelous chocolate cake being cooked up there? And they'll say, yeah, great. Well, shall we have that Friday night? Yes. Okay, so who's going to cook it? Somebody's going to show hands. In that same moment, if this experience shows up, you go, okay, so I might just press a button, get the recipe downloaded, probably to my mobile phone, because that will be quite convenient in the kitchen. I might press another button, and all the ingredients will be in my online shopping's grocery basket, right? And when that basket comes around on Friday afternoon, it's all in there, and I start cooking. So this might be, all the moments of truth put together, apart from the one where you actually have to produce the chocolate cake and make sure that it doesn't burn in the oven. Now, this is quite a direct way to think about this. We at eHarmony, for example, for us, we see a lot of opportunity in this trend, just because, the content, and this says here, brands need to become part of the story, but the content that we see on TV screens and in programs is mostly about relationships. It's not just rom-coms, but it's a lot about relationships, and this is a key moment, at least for our users, where they think about their relationships as well. So I think it's not about us putting a registration form inside CBOX and paying them a lot of money for that, because that's not going to be the right way to do this. For those of you who don't know, eHarmony has about 250 questions, and it's a very deep questionnaire to go through, so it'll take you 30, 40 minutes to do that. Actually, I believe you probably rather watch the show in that moment, and when that's finished, you might come to us. But we have some other things. So we have a very big advice side where we give you tips, and as a company, 40% of eHarmony's company is actually about relationship science. It's about the technology, the matching. We have 7 PhD on staff. We have an eHarmony lab that works 365 days a year. It is very challenging for us to bring all that knowledge to you in the right context. This might provide the right context, because you might be thinking about, hey, actually, I'd like some advice on my next date. I'd like some advice on how to go about that. We can offer you that. We also have success couples. These are the ones that found love on eHarmony. And they come to us to tell us about their stories. This is very powerful. They are real evangelists for the brand. They can relate, so singles can relate to success couples because they have done this journey. They have gone into the online dating world. So we can bring that closer to you as well, and have more of a contextual environment within your enhanced TV viewing. So what I think that means is, I think social TV brings then a lot of trends together, and together with the penetration of smartphones, the rise of tablets, there's a real opportunity, but also something we need to really think about. Because if I now just give you a 30-second ad, that might not be enough by any stretch of the imagination, so I might have to create all the other content pieces around it. I might have to think about this customer journey much more deeply. My brand might get voted up or voted down by friends within an instant. They might just say, hey, have you seen this ad? What do you think about this? Well, actually, I tried it, it's brilliant. Will be a great endorsement in the second that you are putting the content out there. So I don't have all the answers to this, but I think this is something we really need to get into and understand, and figure out what that means for our brands. That's about it. Okay.